Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. But let's not forget that we're also the perfect podcast for the Universal curious, those Disney fans who are looking to learn more about the themed entertainment offerings at Universal. And helping lead us, the team of the Universal Curious, I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Eric Hersey. How are you tonight, Eric?
I'm doing great. And that's right, Jim. I'm the one that gets to ask all the dumb questions so that way they don't have to. All right. So when it comes to being Universal curious, granted, I'm going to ask the questions that you guys don't have the access to, but I'm excited, as always, to be under the learning tree of one Jim Hill. And we're expediting my process into Universal credibility. But yeah, I think we're like, 9 episodes in right now, so I'm getting there.
We are. Again, I really think you've been doing a good job. But I want to point out, folks, that we are recording this on Tuesday, May 21st. In fact, at 7:04 p.m., which is normally when I'd be making Nancy's dinner. But again, we got to get this thing out the door so it can post on Friday. So that's what we're up to.
Jim, let me ask you, what are we making Nancy tonight? Is it possibly maybe some green cheese? Maybe it's a Shrexel. Do we have any of those shipped up from maybe Florida?
No, sadly, and no swamp dogs or no poppy-licious pink lemonade. By the way, folks, we are referring to the items that just got previewed. They've been doing some press stuff down at Universal Studios Florida this past week, and the first folks have made it behind the construction fence into DreamWorks Land. And so these menu items are things that Eric and I will be talking about later on in today's show. And while we're talking about food-related stuff, you want to hang in there for the second half of today's show when, among other things, we'll be discussing the Pink Panther Cafe, which used to operate at Universal Studios Japan. But before we get to any of that stuff, we, of course, have to acknowledge our sponsor. And today's show is sponsored by touringplans.com. Touring Plans can help you save time and money at theme parks like, Universal Studios and the 4 at Walt Disney World. So please check them out at touringplans.com. So again, Eric, just to drop into it. So again, you and I have both been eyeballing all of the videos that have been coming out of the DreamWorks Land preview, right?
Right. Now you can find all types of short form videos on X, Instagram, Reels. That's where I seem to spend most of my time nowadays. But I wanted to get there as best as I could virtually. So sometimes you could find those long walkthroughs and you get somebody with a nice handheld camcorder walking through. So I was virtually there. I felt like I've got to see it with my own eyes. While walking on a treadmill. So like we really get it going. It's like I'm really doing it.
Wow. Okay.
So I watched about a 16-minute video and I kind of walked around the tour. So it's it's as advertised. We've seen it from overhead, but this was on ground floor. Now, Jim, did you get to watch any of the videos?
Yeah. I wanted to do my due diligence ahead of tonight's podcast recording session. So I went through a number of the recordings that folks have posted, and I think overall it looks like the Universal Creative's done a fine job sort of reimagining the Kidzone on that side of the park.
Right. Now, granted, I was walking on a treadmill to emulate walking around. I couldn't find anything in the house that would emulate that slide. Now, did you see the outhouse slide? And I mean, listen, a week ago or so, we talked about a fart gun. Well, let's keep it going, Jim. Why don't we class this act up? What did you see any or hear any of the sound effects of people going down that slide?
I seem to have blown by the any footage of the flatulent slide. Tonight, after we're done, I'll do right and go back and check that out. But I guess you're sliding out of an outhouse. I guess it kind of comes with the territory.
Right. So I think what was the overall? So I was kind of gauging on, on social to see what everybody was thinking. Now, I mean, we knew what was coming out. They were pretty much open with that. We saw a nice little video they released early on of their Imagineers, their magicians or so forth, that basically was talking about the land. And so it wasn't anything super shocking or surprising. And I guess, Jim, it is just a retheme. It's not 100%. Like, it's not like they built a brand new coaster, right? They kind of tore some stuff down, put some new things on.
Well, now, to be fair here, remember, for example, if we go with Mulholland Madness out at Disney's California Adventure and how that became Goofy's Sky School, or for that matter, we got If You Had Wings, which then became a Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger spin. I mean, this is Universal borrowing from Disney's playbook, and I would argue that if you had been in the land and seen, for example, the a day out with Curious George, or the Woody Woodpecker Nut House coaster, the overlays, what they've done here is definitely a step up. Now, I also want to caution you that a lot of, when you looked at the video, I mean, for example, the Prince Harold Frog chorus thing, you saw some footage of that, right?
I did, yes.
Okay. Now you have to understand that, you have like one blogger at a time stepping into that space and dutifully filming all of this. But the idea is there's supposed to be like 50 kids in there jumping up and down on all of those frog footprints, which then make all of the frogs sing. I mean, I guess I want to caution people that a lot of the kinetics that make an area like this work are the little kids running around. Like, I want to do this, or I want to go to the water play, or that sort of thing. So
yeah, it's kind of funny, Jim, because that's what I was thinking when I was watching this. It was granted, everybody that's getting a media pass, for the most part, unless you're Ryan's World, how many little kids have such a following to get so many people in? I was thinking to myself, I'm like, really, Universal, next time, find a bunch of kids and have them with following. So because I was watching, I'm like, I didn't see any single grown adult laying on a giant splash pad. That should have been a requirement. They should have said, if you want in, we all have to pretend that we're 7-year-old and I need to be screaming and we need parents yelling at you to not get your shoes wet.
Universal Media Team, take a note. All right, that's a great note.
Hey, I have a 7-year-old as well, just to let you know.
That's exactly. You could have had somebody who actually test drove the land.
Right.
But again, based on what I saw, and for example, they had a number of folks did small clips of the Poe show, that park's equivalent of Crush's coaster. Turtle Talk with Crush. I think it looked like it was a fun show, and again, you have to understand that this isn't necessarily. I mean, let's be completely honest here. Nobody is looking at DreamWorks Land and going, honey, let's buy plane tickets. Let's go now. It's not. In fact, I believe the phrase in the theme park resort world is intent to visit. It's not.
Right.
It's not an attraction that will necessarily get people to buy plane tickets and book hotel rooms. But on the other hand, if you do come down to Universal with small children, to have a land like this where you could easily spend an hour or two and they're going to have a ball, that's a smart investment.
Right. And I think, and I looked it up because that's kind of what I asked myself, what was the point of this? Right. It was, I looked at it and I said, it's fine. Right. But I was looking and I was saying, okay, so what was the previous IP? Because we know they mentioned, hey, we got enough IP now on our own. I'm thinking maybe they're paying a lot of licensing fees. So I found out so Curious George was there previously, and that's actually owned by a publishing company. So they were indeed paying licensing to have Curious George. So ripping him out saves money. Barney was ripped out. That was owned by Mattel. Universal does own Woody Woodpecker and American Tail. And then it led to me saying, my kids have no idea who these people are. So at the end of the day, it's really, they upped the ante, because probably you get a 7-year-old, they don't know who Fievel. They don't know he went west or any type of his American Tales, right? So I look at it. It looks to be like the capacity's the same or should be around, but it's just a revamp and getting new characters that will sell merch, will get people excited. When you see the trolls and you see Poe, and literally Shrek, Donkey. These are people that my kids know of all ages.
Yeah.
And I think that is hey, I do want to go over to that land, as opposed to who the heck is Woody Woodpecker? We'll
Well,
skip that.
now, speaking of which, though, it is worth noting, and I just want to put this out there, that the creatives who worked on this project have revealed that somewhere in the land there is a hidden Woody. And if anybody, again, DreamWorks Land will be open to guests fairly shortly. And tell you what, we'll make it worth your while. The first epic Universal podcast listener who comes forward and reveals where the Woody is, I've got a copy of the unofficial Universal Orlando cookbook. I'm willing to put that up as a prize for the
Wow.
first person who comes forward with that info.
I was going to say, how good is the lens on BioReconstruct's camera? Because that's the real question. Bio, you can have yourself a cookbook where nobody else has entry. But no, I'm excited to see that, Jim. And the only negative drawback that I have, and I think, I don't know, did you see anyone complaining about the 2D signs versus the 3D signs? Because that was the big complaint of, hey, we're mixing and matching, and there's some 2D signs, and it looked cheap in that aspect. And I don't know, but that was the big scuttlebutt online.
I think there's the old cliche that there are people in life who are going to complain if they're hung with a new rope. Just sort of like, I mean, if you walk, I mean, you're walking into a brand new land based around really popular IP, and that's your the sign is two dimensional. Oh, well, that's it. I'm leaving the park. Forget it. I can't go in here.
Right.
Toward that end, though, I wanted to know what you thought about the new signage that they put in place for the ET Adventure.
Do you know, Jim, that is a perfect segue to our news or not, because I wasn't really sure if that is news or not. I know there was enough information that hey, it's a new sign. I had to look up the old sign to look at the new sign. I mean, I don't know much about signs, but I'm assuming it's just better going with, it looks like it's wooden, like trees theming now, as opposed to like a marquee, which I'm assuming is kind of geared towards the theming of like maybe Poe's area. I'm not sure where the dimension is. Where
Actually, again, when we get you down there to Universal Orlando, I am going to insist that we do the ET Adventure, and I say that as someone who actually intensely dislikes the ET Adventure, because it has the greatest queue on the planet. I mean, once you get past a pretty dumb pre-show, which has Steven Spielberg and here's your pass to get on the set, which you then have to hand in to a team member who takes your name, and that'll be important later. But you then enter a pine forest, and I mean, you literally, the door opens and you're hit by that pine scent. But it's, if you remember E.T. at all, and how the spaceship comes down in the forest, and so it captures both the beginning and the end of the movie beautifully, and there's some wonderful storytelling moments. They do a beautiful job of setting up, putting you back in the world of ET, and this recreating a forest environment inside of a building. So that actually is, when you're looking at that signage that sort of suggests, okay, this looks like something out of a national forest, that's to help better tee up the queue space for this attraction. Now, mind you, you eventually get on a bike and you fly, thanks to ET, and you fly over Hollywood. And the ride is great right up until that moment. And then you're going back to ET's home planet, and this attraction makes a hard right into Small World meets Diabetes World. It is just so relentlessly cute. And in fact, ET is joined by gotta be 100 littler ETs who are frolicking and cute and swinging on vines, and it's the worst.
Okay. Well, Jim, listen.
But it ends well, because when you're going back into the load station, you passed an audio animatronic ET that says your name. I mean, that was the whole thing of goodbye, Eric.
Oh, man.
So
that's impressive. I did not know that.
It was a cool effect in 1990, and it's a cool effect today. However, and telling you a little bit about the company that I keep, I had friends who would deliberately in line. It's like, okay, what's your name, sir? Well, my name is Dill, and this is my lovely wife, Doe. And it's just with the notion that the idea was to, can we get him to say bad words?
It's a Homer Simpson prank call, right?
There
That's
we
what we're
go. There
that's
we
what we're
go. There
doing.
we go.
Or
Yeah. So,
Bart Simpson, yeah.
but again, you're trying to get ETs to say bad words.
Oh,
And
well, listen,
yeah.
when you told me they had a nice queue, literally
Mhm.
all they would have to do is put a bunch of Reese's Pieces in a line and walk me to the ride, and that would be fine
Okay.
for me. That
Okay.
that's that's the part of the movie that I recall. But I think, well, let me ask you this real quickly. New
Mhm.
sign, good signs for ET staying around.
Yes. So what's kind of interesting is that when they originally announced this park coming to Orlando, they made a very big deal in like 86, 87 that Spielberg, I mean, was a huge part of this park, and he was developing all sorts of stuff. And what for me is fascinating is the fact that they made a point when they were doing the initial announcement for Epic Universe that Spielberg is in the mix there. But the interesting thing is now he's the old man, which is sort of like, and we still have Steven Spielberg involved here. And an interesting bend on the story. This was one of the ways that they convinced the folks in Beijing to the effect of, oh, well, you definitely want to be in business with Universal building a theme park because we have Hollywood legend Steven Spielberg part of our creative team. And the Chinese, it's like, oh, yeah, the old guy. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Wisdom.
So wisdom. That's it exactly.
Right.
So,
No, I think
yeah.
that's great.
But long story short, yes, the new sign right there for ET. And remember, if you poke at the Kidzone a little hard and look at what Universal Creative previously talked about putting in there, that was Mario. That was the Donkey Kong ride that was going to go in this park. So and with the idea that the Mario ride would have actually gone into the giant building that ET is inside of, much the same way that Hollywood's version of ET became the Mummy coaster. And Mr. Spielberg, as I understand it, raised his hand, and the phrase "Oh hell no" was said, and so that's kind of why Mario's over in Epic Universe. But
So we'll
anyway,
give ET credit for Epic Universe. That's what I
there
hear.
we go.
No,
There we go. Or
love it. So Jim, here's a story that is intriguing to me. So there's
mhm,
a Universal Orlando gift card offer that includes a wand, a lanyard, a
mhm,
shopping bag, and a discount. So
mhm,
the question is, this is a good deal. So guests who purchase a $500 merchandise shopping cart will then receive that
mhm,
interactive wand we talked about, a
mhm,
lanyard, like we mentioned, a reusable shopping bag, and then 10% savings on purchases made with that card, which then makes it a
mhm,
$135 value. So sounds great on paper. Obviously, that's
mhm,
saying you're going to spend $500 in merchandise, right?
mhm,
So I think that. So I guess really when it came down to it, I had to look up. I've never seen Universal gift cards. If you walk into a Target, it seems like there's
mhm,
just plastered with Disney gift cards. But
mhm,
I did my due diligence, and yes,
mhm,
they make Universal gift cards that you can buy around. So are
mhm.
you familiar with the Universal gift cards? Have you bought any before?
I have been gifted a few over time, and they work just like the Disney cards. But again, what's kind of intriguing about this and understanding that, think about it. We have the summer that's coming up with leaning into the nostalgia. In fact, the tribute store is getting ready to open with all of its early '90s Universal Studios Florida stuff. Likewise, we've got again DreamWorks Land opening. We've got our new nighttime show coming out on Universal Lagoon. Not to mention the parade that'll be starting in July. So a lot of AP folks are going to be coming back to the parks, and something like this, I mean, the very thing you just sort of laid down to the effect of, okay, if you spend 500, you're going to get $135 worth of effective freebies, and it's like, all right, convincing people who already come to the parks to spend on this card, especially this summer out ahead of the opening. Epic Universe next year. Because again, that's the challenge: is getting people into the park or getting the book hotel rooms in the face of, wow, maybe I should wait for that new park. So things like this, where it's like, wow, you get a shopping discount and you get an interactive wand and all of this cool stuff. So
Right. Well, that opened up. Let me ask you this, Jim. Have you ever heard of the website raise.com?
I have not. What is a
All
raise?
right. So years ago, in probably
Hmm.
2014 or 15, when I basically dove into the rabbit hole of Disney fandom, there
Hmm.
was a nice
Hmm.
podcast out there that always talked about like cheap ways to get
Hmm.
Disney gift cards and so forth. And I
Hmm.
learned of this raise.com. And what it is if you're gifted a gift card, you can then go
Hmm.
back on this site and sell that gift card, what is remaining on that gift card. Right. And
Oh.
it is just a circuit of, and back in the day, you could always get 5, 7, almost 20% off things.
Hmm.
And this website, I looked the other day, does indeed have
Hmm.
universal gift cards. So if
Oh,
somebody
okay.
gifted someone universal and they're like, hey, I'm not going to go this year, or oh, I don't need to spend any, they would go back on and they probably sell it, not
Hmm.
full price, but they would get actual cash out of that. And then people
Hmm.
like myself who are thrifty and trying to figure out the best deals can go on and
Hmm.
buy that. So at the time frame, all of the gift cards for Universal were sold out. But I would just
Hmm.
say anyone out there that is looking to get a bargain, go into raise.com and set up an alert that when there's gift cards that come in, you'll get a nice email and then you have an opportunity to save some cash and or when you go down to Universal, have a discount on some of the purchases that you're having. So it's a
Oh,
little tip
that's
that I learned along the way that looks like it is a hack that'll work for Universal as well.
wow. Smart suggestion. Thanks for passing that along.
So, Jim, the next news is
Hmm.
the one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish at Islands of Adventure is closed for refurbishment. Now, this ride is
Hmm.
expected to reopen on May 25th, 2024. Jim, is this news or not news?
Well, I mean, look, it's a spinner in Seuss's Landing, and once you get to the park, and I think Miles would actually enjoy this because it has a fiendish water feature. The notion is that again, it's fish, so the idea is once it gets up and running, streams of water then begin to spray at the spinner, and if you decide you want to be dry, you can raise yourself out of the at different heights. If on the other hand you want to get dad wet, you make him sit on the outside and you're on the inside and you proceed to move him through every blast of water. So just telling you that story in advance, so if Miles gets any ideas when you get down there to islands, it's like, no pal, you're sitting on the outside.
Well,
So
I don't know too many people who cancel their trip for this one, but that is good news to know.
yep.
I would deem I'm trying to set you up, Jim. I think that's not news. I think
It's always news.
right.
So
Well, that's a
okay.
good thing for this podcast,
Mhm.
right? All right, Jim.
Mhm.
Here's
Mhm.
one that we're looking at is that Universal Pictures sets dates for Megan
Mhm.
2.0, The Black Phone
Mhm.
2, and Five Nights at Freddy's 2. So, have you
Mhm.
seen any of those movies? Have you seen the first ones? More than likely.
I'm 65 years old. So when I want to be frightened, I open the Visa bill. I mean, it just sort of I've reached a point in life where it's like it's a horror film. I mean, there were some very talented people who make these things and they have lovely stories to tell about the movies they're making. I just don't need to go see them.
Right.
Although I have to say, I'm kind of intrigued. Again, a Megan 2.0, a Black Phone 2, a Five Nights at Freddy's 2, no Abigail 2. So I'm guessing
Maybe a little too
that
early. Maybe a little too early to tell. I mean, I know it didn't do
there
as
we
well.
go.
But
There we
my
go.
thoughts. So the
Okay.
reason I bring this up, all those being horror
Mhm.
stories, is
Mhm.
from what I can tell, just being involved
Mhm.
here, they start making these
Mhm.
Halloween Horror Nights houses, right? And these all
Mhm.
seem, hey, if we're going to be promoting movies coming up, so forth, these are all horrors.
Mhm.
These seem like they could be prime candidates for houses or things to go on at Halloween Horror Night. So I don't know if you've heard
Mhm.
anything on the streets that, hey, I mean, a Five Nights at Freddy's would be pretty
Mhm.
darn cool as a house.
This is true. This is true. More to the point, there was an absolutely amazing piece of cosplay. I want to say not this past Comic Con, but I think the first year that Comic Con came back after the pandemic. Somebody had put together a what is the bear's name? Buzzy Bear or that sort
Oh,
of.
the thing is, my son dressed up for him like Halloween. I should know this,
Mhm.
but it
Okay.
Scream
But
at your
no, I
phone
mean,
loud
it
enough,
had
guys. Let us know. Let us know in the comments, right?
yeah, the bear. I mean, it was this absolutely on model, scary, beautiful, detailed version of the Five Nights at Freddy animatronic bear, and walking free at Comic Con, and people just lost their minds. So, no, you're not wrong. A maze featuring those characters again. They could just the adult diaper concession just would be worthwhile. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, we did actually get 3 houses announced this week, actually. So
Mhm.
I, being a newbie, and I know this is going to make
Mhm.
people angry, I had to look them up. I literally thought these were real movies. And I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
no, they're just themes. So
Mhm.
Slaughter Cinema 2. So let's talk about that. So
Yeah.
there was a Slaughter Cinema 1 that was a big hit. It's
Mhm.
if you're dying for a B movie horror marathon, head to Cary
Mhm.
Drive-In. Scream through
Mhm.
scenes from Creature Features, Grindhouse Gone, Spaghetti Westerns, and more. That is the description
Mhm.
of Slaughter Cinema 2.
Mhm.
So that sounds fun. Then we have Goblin's Feast. In this house, it
Mhm.
sounds like you'll get to visit Goblin's Feast Tavern, where goblins, orcs,
Mhm.
hobgoblins, and witches are preparing a lavish feast. So now we have some goblin.
Well, but you overlooked you kind of buried the lead there. Yes, they're preparing a lavish feast, and you're the ingredients for the lavish
Of
feast.
course.
So
Right. Yeah.
there we go.
So hopefully
So
you sprinkled some salt and pepper on you today. And then I
there
think
we go.
actually just this morning, I think I grabbed it when we were grabbing this. This is Major Sweets Candy Factory. So this
Mhm.
is not Toothums, right? This is
Mhm.
not this is
No, and I would imagine the folks at Tootsum, they're, oh, great.
right.
Thank you for doing this.
Right.
Okay.
Well, guess
So,
what? You've been invited to chaperone a field trip to the candy factory. The
mhm.
deadly delicious treats turn the kids into sugar-fueled fiends. So it's Willy Wonka 3. No.
Wow. Okay. Well, all right. The interesting thing is they did a scare zone I want to say 2 years ago that basically was sort of Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade gone wrong, and the notion was that there was a candy factory that had handed out tainted treats, and I just wonder if Major Sweets Candy Factor. I wonder if it's the same storyline. I wonder if they're circling back on like a story they previously created. So,
Well, I do recall that Len did these houses last year. I believe he went, and I
mhm,
believe he's going this year. So if maybe we
mhm,
can get a nice recap of what's the scariest, what to expect. But I say stay tuned. We'll talk to our friend, and we'll get all
mhm.
the information in terms of all the houses that are coming up.
And speaking of staying tuned, folks, in a moment, we're going to use a comment that came into us via Twitter as an excuse to talk about Universal and the Pink Panther. But first, this. Okay, so we're back, and again, folks, Eric and I love it when epic Universal podcast listeners reach out and have been enjoying the show, but throw questions at us or comments or that sort of thing. And Stingray Travel just a couple of days ago it sent a tweet our way, and what was interesting is he was sharing something that Universal High had put out there, and this was rare footage of a Pink Panther costume character on the upper lot at Universal Studios Hollywood. And evidently, this footage was taken back in 1995, and Stingray Travel reached out and said, "Whoa, is this a test run for Universal Studios Japan? And how did they manage to get this character into the Universal parks away from MGM-UA, the folks who made the Pink Panther movies?" So, Eric, did you get to see the? I mean, again, it's a video from 1995, so
It
it's
looked
all
great.
blown out.
It looked
Oh yeah.
great. It was no. You squinted. You looked real close. You did get to see it. It was
Mm-hmm.
1995 dubbed
Mm-hmm.
quality. It's kind of my favorite. We need to send it
Mm-hmm.
over to the guys at Retro WDW and see if they can fix it up for us.
And I also want to point out that briefly you do see the Universal Hollywood team member step in to sort of help with the Pink Panther character, and it's like, wow, he almost pulls off those short pants. That was an interesting thing they were making the team members wear during the summer out in Hollywood. But anyway, now Stingray Travel again mentioned this was a test run for Universal Japan, and what he's referring to is as far back as July of 2005, the Pink Panther uh, has been a strong presence at Universal Studios Japan. What I mean by that is this bright pink cartoon character, which was first introduced to moviegoers here in the States back in March of '64 during the title sequence of that Peter Sellers, David Niven comedy caper, the Pink Panther. Now, what's great at Universal Japan is Pink Panther is not just a walk-around character. He's prominently featured in parades and festivals that are staged in Osaka. Like, for example, when they did the water parade in 2007, Pink Panther got his very own float, the Heart Hibiscus float, as he sprayed people along the parade route. He also got his own store in the Hollywood section of the park, or used to have. And when I say used to, that's because, well, again, we talked about it in the show. Despicable Me 4 is coming out on July 3rd, and Universal Studios Japan wants to do its part to promote this new animated feature from Illuminations, which is why the Minions have temporarily taken over this store and, again, that theme park's Hollywood area, which, by the way, used to be called Studio Style and Pink, and that was because it primarily sold Pink Panther merch. And now all of those fixtures that were previously pink have now been clumsily painted yellow. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So, all right. So anyway, why was the Pink Panther wandering around the upper lot at Universal back in 1995? Or for that matter, how did the Pink Panther cross the Pacific and become a fixture at Universal Studios Japan in 2005? Well, all right. Let's first talk about that 1995 walk around. Which again, you look at the footage, not a great likeness. Okay, just sort of looks like, wow, you went to the Halloween outlet store, and it's like you got the Pink Panther right off the shelf there.
Yeah.
Now on the other hand, if you go now and type in Universal Studios Japan Pink Panther, oh my God, Eric, that thing looks like it walked straight out of a DePatie Freeling ad. It's an amazing likeness. They did a great job. So what's with the guy with the bad Pink Panther outfit on the upper lot? Well, he's not there to promote MGM UA's latest attempt to revive the live action Pink Panther movies, which again started with mentioned at the top of the show that the original Pink Panther movie, March of '64. Now, that did so well at the box office. MGM took a two-tiered approach. And again, the Pink Panther character gets introduced in an animated title sequence for that Peter Sellers David Niven movie. And everybody loved it. So what MGM UA did, and this is really interesting, Eric, at a time when Disney and Warner Brothers and everybody else is getting out of the theatrical cartoon business. MGM UA decides to go into the business with these series of Pink Panther cartoons. And it turns out to be a really smart play because the very first one of these, the Pink Fink, comes out in December of '64 and manages to win that year's Academy Award for Best Animated Short, which you have to admit that's a pretty impressive way for a new series of animated shorts for theaters to debut.
Right.
Okay. On a separate track, MGM UA puts a live-action Pink Panther sequel, A Shot in the Dark, into development. That also opens in theaters in '64, which tells you what Hollywood was like back in the day. The whole notion of, ooh, that was popular. We need a sequel yesterday. And they made it yesterday. So, but here's the thing. Shot in the Dark also makes so much money that MGM UA turns to Peter Sellers, who plays Inspector Clouseau in the movie, as well as Blake Edwards, the talented writer-director who wrote both the original Pink Panther film and Shot in the Dark, and says, hey, can we have a third one? But by now, Eric, Peter Sellers and Blake Edwards, who feuded during the making of the second Pink Panther film, are no longer speaking to one another. And so they refuse to reteam to work on a third Pink Panther movie. So MGM UA says, the hell with it. We'll make one without Peter and Blake. What could go wrong? And so Inspector Clouseau, starring Alan Arkin, who actually does a pretty good job. That comes out in February of 1968. Unfortunately, underperforms at the box office. And that, for a time, is the end of the live action Pink Panther film series. Now, as for the Pink Panther animated shorts, MGM UA makes 62 of these things between December of 64 and June of 1969. But again, there was a reason that Disney and Warner Brothers got out of the animated shorts business, and that was largely because the market for these things were drying up. Exhibitors just they like, look, we'll put the coming attractions in front of the movie, but if we put a cartoon, that's 7 minutes, and over the course of the day, that's one fewer screening of this movie, and people out here aren't out in the lobby buying popcorn and soda. But they had all these cartoons. And so they did this really smart thing. They took all of these animated for theatrical release shorts and repurposed them to make a television show. So the Pink Panther show debuts on NBC as part of the Peacock Network's Saturday morning lineup in September of 69. And it is such a big hit that, well, first of all, it runs all the way till 1978, so 9 seasons. It also allows to Patty Freeling to make an additional 62 animated shorts. So by the time the show ends its run in the summer of 78, there's 124 Pink Panther cartoons. But then also, on a parallel track, in the middle of the 1970s, the live action Pink Panther film series gets revived. We first get Return of the Pink Panther in May of 75, which reteams Peter Sellers and Blake Edwards. It's interesting, Eric. You make a bunch of bomb movies that nobody goes to, and suddenly you don't want to feud anymore. It's like, oh, please, let's the two of us get together and make a movie that people want to go see. And they did. In fact, it did so well the summer of 75 that MGM UA puts, again, immediately a sequel into production. That, Eric, by the way, arrives in theaters the very next year, December of 76, and does even better than Return of the Pink Panther. So MGM UA immediately turns to Sellers and Edwards and says, we need another one of these ASAP. So they do Revenge of the Pink Panther, which arrives in theaters July of 78. And so just so people understand here, that's 3 brand new Pink Panther films delivered to theaters inside of 3 years and 2 months, May of 75 to July of 78. Which, not going to lie, Eric, kind of put a strain on Peter Sellers and Blake Edwards' working relationship. So, and again, Revenge of the Pink Panther does so well. MGM UA just, come on, let's do another one. And Sellers absolutely refuses. In fact, he says, look, I want nothing to do with that, man. I'm going to go off and write my own movie. And he does. He writes the script for The Romance of the Pink Panther. And that's all teed up to be the next film of the series. In fact, Clive Donner is going to direct it. But then in July of 1980, Peter Sellers has a heart attack and dies. And Eric, for a while, that puts a button on everything Pink Panther related. We mentioned earlier the Pink Panther animated series ends a 9-year run at NBC in 1978. But ABC, kind of raises its hand and says, we'll take it. And it runs for 2 years over on the Alphabet Network as part of their Saturday morning. But it seemed to be running out of gas. So it's like, all right, we'll let that go. And so it goes off the air in the late summer of 1980s, which again, just a month after Peter Sellers had his fatal heart attack. But here's the interesting thing, Eric. In 1981, Blake Edwards calls the executives at MGM UA and says, when we were filming Return of the Pink Panther and the Pink Panther Strikes Again and Revenge of the Pink Panther, we shot a lot of extra footage, and there were some really funny outtakes, but there was stuff that we just couldn't fit in. And I have all of this footage. And what if I edit all that footage together in such a way that it then allows us to revive the Pink Panther film series? And in fact, maybe even allows us to continue it without Peter Sellers. And MGM executives love this idea. So December of 82, we get The Trail of the Pink Panther. And then just 8 months after that, we get The Curse of the Pink Panther in August of 1983 with the idea of these 2 new installments being that Inspector Clouseau is missing. And someone has to find him. And who do they turn to? The world's worst detective, who is one Clifton Slay of the New York Police Department, who is played by Ted Waz. And but here's the thing, Eric. Audiences, they came out for the first one. They came out for the trail of the Pink Panther because it's like, I'm going to get to see more Peter Sellers, and I love Peter Sellers as Clouseau. But the box office for Curse of the Pink Panther really fell off because they had blown through all of the footage they had. Though they did have one really funny cameo that I think you'd enjoy if you watch this movie. The gimmick is that Clouseau has gone off and gotten plastic surgery. So when it's finally revealed who is now playing Clouseau, it's Roger Moore. Oh, that era is James Bond, but he's doing this absolutely great, terrible French accent, just
Oh,
the way that Peter Sellers did, and it was a very funny button on a movie that to be honest uh, needed to be funnier. But on the other hand, around the same time, on the heels of the success of the Muppet Babies TV show, MGM decided they wanted to try something similar with the Pink Panther. So they launched a new animated series, the Pink Panther and Sons, which it was built around his preteen son Pinky and his toddler brother Panky.
real
Um,
quick, Jim.
yeah,
So I watched Boomerang when
mhm,
last time I was down in Florida, and we just had Boomerang on. It was approved, and the amount
mhm,
of shows that were all
mhm.
Fred Flintstone as kids and the Scooby Doo as kids. This must have just been a craze. We have Muppet
Oh,
Babies. It was just like, we'll take the standalone what they are, and we'll just make them kids, and it'll be a success. So I'm
no,
wondering
no,
to
no.
hear if that happened here with Pink Panther.
You are You are not wrong. That I want to say there was a Yogi,
Oh yeah,
Yogi Junior. It's just they were
everything
all
as
awful.
kids.
Yeah, but audiences, in much the same way that they kind of turned their back on Trail of the Pink Panther and Curse of the Pink Panther, uh, Pink Panther and Sons, the animated series, also they didn't again. It just put it on NBC. People went nope, and 13 episodes later, it was off the air. But now, 80s give way to the 90s, and the Pink Panther films and the animated series, the originals, uh, they're constantly playing on cable. They're syndicated all over the place, and people are still watching. People still loving them, and so the MGM executives are like, isn't there a way we can revive this franchise? Because I feel like we're leaving money on the table without new Pink Panther stuff. So they it's a decade later, and they reach out to Blake Edwards again and say, "Do you have any ideas?" And this is when he goes, "Well, yeah, I do. Son of the Pink Panther." And but the gimmick here was, and it's kind of intriguing. Roberto Benigni, who is an acknowledged master of physical comedy. And the idea here was that over the course of this new Pink Panther film, we would find out that Benigni's character was actually the illegitimate son of Inspector Clouseau, and that Roberto's mom was supposedly the female character that Clouseau had bedded back in 1964 in A Shot in the Dark. And since MGM UA now had a new live action Pink Panther movie in the works, it only made sense. Well, okay, TV side, let's get a new Pink Panther animated series going. But this has to be different than what we've done previously. So, what can we do that's different? Oh, how about this time the Pink Panther talks? So, and interesting. Do you know Max Headroom at all? The faux computer generated character that MTV used to have
Oh yeah.
on.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, that was that character. That was poor Matt Fewer under a lot of makeup, but Matt was the guy they hired to be the voice of the Pink Panther. And anyway, August of 1993, Son of the Pink Panther comes out into theaters, bombs. The new Pink Panther animated series debuts 1 month later, September of that same year, 1993. Does a little bit better. It ekes out a 2-year run, which brings us now to the summer of 1995 and our Pink Panther walk around character on the upper lot of the Universal Studios Hollywood. And he's not there, Eric, to promote a movie, but rather he's there to promote the new Pink Panther animated series, which Universal at the time was running on a number of the TV stations that conglomerate owned. So this was actually a bit of corporate cross promotion. And again, I want to be very clear here. Universal Creative did not make that outfit. That again, it looks bad because they rented it from a third party. But now, so let's get to why the Pink Panther debuted at Universal Studios Japan in 2005. And again, you got to throw a bone to the Disney fans here. Believe it or not, folks, it was because of Duffy, the Disney bear.
That is insane, Jim. That literally is the craziest thing that I never thought that would come around and you'd say, oh, that's why. But intrigued to hear why.
Well, now remember, Duffy was originally launched at Walt Disney World in 2002 as the Disney Bear. And it did not connect with consumers. In fact, that used to be the reason once upon a time you went to the Once Upon a Toy store at, well, now Disney Springs, but that was the only place on property you could get Duffy the bear. But again, it didn't work. So they reintroduced the character, they relaunch him at the Tokyo Disney Resort in 2004, and he becomes this enormous success, which does not go unnoticed by the folks at Universal Studios Japan. And the folks in Osaka are looking at the market, who's buying Duffy, and it's a lot of the Japanese shop girls who go to the parks all the time, and because they live at home with mom and dad, they have lots of spending money. So it's like, oh, okay, so they like cute stuff, they like pink stuff, and who's cuter and pinker than the Pink Panther? So 2005, July of 2005 is when the Pink Panther debuts in Osaka at Universal Studios Japan with that beautiful, amazing outfit that, again, looks like he walked straight out of the cartoon. And they lean into it. And in fact, what's so funny is for the park's 10th anniversary in 2011, what Universal Studios Japan decided to do is they teamed the Pink Panther with Hello Kitty, Snoopy, and Elmo. So it was the Fab Four of cuteness. And again, for the 10th anniversary of the park, that was the image that you want to buy a T-shirt with this, you want to buy the plush, you want to buy the hats. And again, they have done wonderful short-lived things at the park. And the one that kind of breaks my heart that I never made it over there in time to see is the Pink Panther Cafe, where you entered this incredibly pink environment and had all sorts of bright pink food. And every so often, the Pink Panther would enter the room to that wonderful Hank Mancini Pink Panther theme song.
Oh,
so
that's that. Well, that is an image that I can see in my head and hear as well, because that is the infamous song. So what a story, Jim. Who would have known that simply an image sent over via Twitter just can stir up that kind of information. And I was looking, no idea that there was that many Pink Panther movies. I mean, literally, I scrolled and scrolled on IMDb. Mm-hmm. It's insane the amount of movies that were made. Had no idea.
And remember, in 2005, we got the Steve Martin did, I want to say 2 of them so far. And we got his take on Inspector Clouseau, which, again, smart to take somebody who's as good as physical comedy as Steve Martin is and have him do his take on that character. But yeah, it's just fascinating. And again, thanks to Universal High for sharing that video. And more to the point, thanks to Stingray Travel for bringing it to our attention. And that's why we got the long, pointless story today.
Oh, so I'm all for it. Knowledge leveling up here. Now I know more about the Pink Panther. I know stuff. So it's just every day getting a little bit better. But we welcome everyone. If you want to enlighten us again or give us, really give Jim a reason to tip off and say, hey, here's a story I could tell you, which is what we love. You can reach us both on X. I'm just at Eric Hersey. And Jim, where can we send stuff to you?
Well, I'm also on X, Twitter, and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook. as Jim Hill Media News. But also want to remind you folks that we do have a bunch of other podcasts and shows here we'd love you to check out. We, of course, have Disney Dish that we do with Len Testa. Likewise, Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor. That's our animation news show. I want to remind you that Drew also with Charles Hood does the wonderful Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. That's well worth checking out. We also have Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gahn. In fact, Brian was just down at Disneyland yesterday, checking out all the stuff that's continuing to go on with Seasons of the Force, the Star Wars festival there. And then, of course, we have your lovely bride, Lauren Hersey. We just recorded a brand new I Want That Too with her. And again, I'm always fascinated where that goes story-wise. Also, two more things before we go here. I want to remind you about Disney Unpacked, the video series Len and I do with Jim Schul, which you can find over at Patreon. And we're getting ready to launch our next show in June, which is about Mater's Junkyard Jamboree and how that attraction actually spawned 3 other rides around the world for Disney. Makes use of the same ride system, but uses very different characters. And also, one other thing, folks, in just a few weeks, I will be traveling out to Dayton, Disneyana. That's going to be June, I want to say June 8th, 9th, and 10th. This is a wonderful fundraising event for Pirate Packs. This is a charity that helps out kids for the West Carleton School District who are dealing with food scarcity issues. And so it's there's going to be a room full of dealers so that you can find all sorts of wonderful collectibles. And I'm also going to be giving 2 talks this year at the event. One of them is going to be about the 30th anniversary of The Lion King. Lots of great stories there. And the other one, we're going to do a deep dive on Disney and the Muppets. And that that story just breaks my heart sometimes. But again, if you want to hear that, come on out to the Hope Hotel.
Right, Jim. We met up last year there, so
we did.
It's driving distance for the Hersey. So we'll check our calendar and we'll see if we can come see you again.
That would be great. So, and I think that's it, right?
That does it. That is another episode of the Epic Universal Podcast where we covered lots of news. We got some new information, and we're going to keep this a rolling. So we thank everyone for tuning in and sending stuff over, and we welcome you to continue to do that. But on behalf of Jim Hill, I'm Eric Hersey, and thanks for listening.